All right, we'll get started here in just a couple of minutes. People are still joining, so if anybody wants to keep their video on, that's awesome. Then I have a couple of faces to talk to. If you don't want video, not a big deal. Everybody should be muted, it looks like on my end, just so we don't get any cross talking. But if you are not muted, please mute yourself just so that there's not background noise and that kind of stuff. So. All right, and it's 1:31, so we are going to go ahead and get started. If anybody needs to be let in after we get started, we'll just take care of that as we're going. So first of all, welcome and good afternoon. First ever virtual Strong Talk that we've done at OsteoStrong, Healthy Bones for Life. It's a little bit different for me. This is the first time that I've ever hosted a Zoom, although we've been doing Zoom stuff now for a handful of months. So welcome, and I'm very glad that you guys could join us. And if you couldn't join us, you'll be getting the recording anyway. So before we get started, I just want to go over a few housekeeping rules as far as Zoom is concerned. This is an interactive Zoom, so I want this to be as realistic and as like a group setting as we possibly can. So if at any point you have any questions, comments, need clarification, we'll be touching in with Sarah. She's going to be monitoring the chat. So if you hover around your Zoom screen or on the bottom of your Zoom screen, if you're on a computer, you'll see the bar pops up and there's a little icon that says chat, and then you can go ahead and post a comment in the chat. And we'll be stopping periodically through the webinar today to go through those. So first and foremost, please don't hesitate. This webinar will also be recorded and is going to be emailed out and texted out, hopefully this afternoon if technology goes well. So everyone will get a recording of this as well. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce myself. There's some people on here who are not members or who do not know me very well, but I'm Dr. Becky Baer. Initially trained as a chiropractic physician, and I had my own clinic down in Beersford for over 15 years. And about 2 years ago, we switched gears and opened OsteoStrong in Sioux Falls. So it'll be 2 years. We started build out this fall, and our grand opening will be 2 years in December. So it's been a wild ride. This last 6 months, 8 months has been crazy for everyone, including us. So, excuse me. Throughout my time in the clinic, keeping people strong, pain-free, and active, especially as we age, became a passion of mine. This led me down a path to discovering how important our skeletal system is, and it's arguably one of the most critical systems in the human body. But no one thinks about their bones, right? I mean, unless we break something or we end up with a diagnosis of osteopenia or osteoporosis, who thinks about their bones? And on that note, first questions, tell me one thing you know about your bones, or a question you have about osteoporosis, or just bone health in general. We'd love to kind of get an idea where everyone is beginning on this journey before this webinar really gets going. So if you have any comments, Sarah's going to be looking. And anything so far? All right. So she'll continue to watch, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to stop my video, and we're going to start screen sharing for a PowerPoint presentation. All right. So Healthy Bones for Life. Today's presentation, we're going to dive into about 6 key points. We're going to learn why bone health should matter to you now more than ever. We're going to develop an understanding of bone growth, development, and remodeling. We're going to discover the 7 key functions of bone. Bone is actually so much more than just structure and support. We're going to talk about some lifestyle factors that may be putting you at risk. Some of them might surprise you. We're going to dive into bone density and osteoporosis and interpreting a DEXA scan and a T-score. And then finally, we're going to talk about slowing bone loss and then the science behind actually building bone density back even if you've been consistently losing. So why does bone health matter so much? Our skeletal system is actually one of the most critical systems in the human body. If we think about it, what happens when we stop moving? We get old, right? And everything starts to suffer. And in fact, the total absence of movement is what? Death, right? That's exactly what happens to the body when it stops moving. So there's four primary reasons why bone health matters so much. First, our physical health, our ability to move and be active, is the secret sauce to maintaining health and vitality in all other systems of the body. When we're able to move and enjoy life, our heart health, digestion, brain health, kidneys, liver, hormone balance, everything improves. But the opposite is true as well. Secondly, the strength of our bone tissue determines the strength of everything that attaches to it. So the muscles, ligaments, tendons, joint structures, everything. In fact, our brain will never allow our muscles to become stronger than what our bones can handle. We'll never be able to have muscle power enough to break our own bones. So as we age and naturally lose bone density, we have a harder time keeping our muscles strong as well. Thirdly, bone diseases such as osteoporosis are increasing at alarming rates. 1 out of every 2 women and 1 out of every 4 men over the age of 50 are at risk for osteoporosis, low bone density, and will suffer a fracture. In fact, we're even seeing bone density issues and increased fracture rates in our youth. I don't know about you guys, but when I was in high school, very few of my high school colleagues, and especially the athletes, broke bones or had to have like orthopedic surgeries. You know, they didn't blow out their knees, they didn't tear rotator cuffs and things of that nature. The last statistic that I saw, which was about a year ago, is 63% of our high schoolers will have either suffered a fracture or have had an orthopedic surgery by the time they graduate. So that number is huge. There's many theories for this. We have very sedentary lifestyles now, especially in our kids. Diet, food allergies that are on the rise, and especially dairy allergies. Digestive diseases such as irritable bowel and celiac disease. Environmental toxicity, stress, lack of sleep. It kind of creates the perfect storm. And then finally, in addition to all of that, our bone tissue serves many vital functions in the body, and it's so much more than just structure and support. And we'll be discussing that in more detail soon. So Sarah, how's the chat doing? Are there any questions, clarifications? All right, we'll move right along. So we're gonna start to talk about bone development, growth, and remodeling. We'll touch briefly on this so you have a better understanding of just bone health in general. But it's easy to think of bone as a hard, lifeless part of our body, but bone is actually living, growing tissue that's constantly being formed and broken down. Because of a process called remodeling, where cells called osteoclasts break down bone, and that's this guy right here with the big jackhammer, and cells called osteoblasts that build new bone, that's this concrete layer laying down new bone. The bones that you have now are not the same bones that you had 7 to 10 years ago, and they'll not be the same bones you have 7 to 10 years from now. This gives you the possibility of improving your bones with the right stimulus. In healthy bone, the osteoclast and the osteoblast activity is balanced. When this remodeling becomes unbalanced, in other words, when the breaking down happens faster than the formation of new bone, bones lose density and can become thin and fragile. So let's talk about how bone changes throughout our lives. Throughout childhood, the osteoblasts, our bone builders, are working harder than the osteoclasts, or the cells that are breaking down bones. So we have a couple of builders here and only one guy tearing it down. There's a very steep acquisition of bone until peak bone mass at around the age of 30 years old. So the bone density you build as a child and throughout early adulthood is incredibly important. Once you reach peak bone mass at around the age of 30, ideally the remodeling process should remain balanced, meaning we have one bone builder for every guy that's breaking bone down. They're working at the same pace, and your bone mass stays relatively stable until around menopause for women and about the age of 70 for men. At menopause, because of the decrease in the hormone estrogen, the osteoblasts, our bone builders, typically do not keep up with the osteoclasts, or the cells that are breaking down bone. And there can be a rapid period of bone loss. In fact, during the 5 years around menopause, women can lose as much as 25 to 30% of their bone mass. Men continue to lose bone density at a slower rate than women, but at about the age of 70, the reduction in testosterone begins to cause more rapid bone loss in men as well. So having an understanding of how bone develops helps us understand how we can prevent bone loss and osteoporosis. There are very important things we can do to support our bone health throughout our lives. Kids need to build up as much bone density as they can in their teen years, because during the years around puberty, from about 9 to 14, kids will build more bone than they will lose in their lifetime. So if that process doesn't happen during adolescence, wherever they're at by the age of 30 is as good as it's ever going to get. We also need to think about reducing behaviors that are bad for bones, and we're going to be talking about those shortly. Any questions so far, Sarah? All right. So we're going to talk about 7 key functions of bone. So the first 3, I think everybody is probably familiar with, and the last 4 might be a little bit of a surprise. So number 1, bones protect your internal organs. Obviously, the skull protects the brain, and the ribs protect your heart and lungs. Our bones provide frame and shape so that our body is supported. Otherwise, we'd be a big pile of mush. Our bones enable movement. Bones, skeletal muscles, tendons, ligaments, and joints all function together to enable movement, excuse me, which enables our body parts or the whole body to move along a 3-dimensional space. Bone strength is the limiting factor on the efficiency of this process. Number 4, bones act as a mineral reserve. So our bones will store calcium, phosphorus, and other minerals critical to the functions of the body. Calcium, phosphorus, and other minerals will be absorbed or released to buffer the blood against excessive pH or acidic changes. And these pH or acidic changes are mainly due to diet and stress. Number 5, our bone tissue actually produces blood. Bone marrow, which is the center part of all of our long bones, is the home to stem cells that create red and white blood cells. There's an entire field of study called osteoimmunology, and it's beyond fascinating. But in essence, our osteoblasts, or our new bone cells that are produced, regulate stem cells to produce baby blood cells, including white blood cells. And our osteoclast cells, the ones that break bone down, if they are too active or there's not enough of a balance between osteoblast, bone building, and osteoclast, or bone breaking down, this leads to inflammation, which answers the question why people who have autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis and lupus and fibromyalgia are at a higher risk for bone density issues. Our bones also function in hormone regulation. Bone plays an important role in controlling sugar metabolism, energy balance, and weight through the hormone osteocalcin. Osteocalcin is produced by osteoblasts during new bone formation. And this is really, really important for people who have type 2 diabetes. Bones also detoxify your body. Bone tissue removes heavy metals and other foreign elements, primarily environmental toxins, from the blood, and thus reduce their effects on nerves and other tissues in the body. And any questions on that or clarifications? All right. So now we're going to get into some lifestyle factors, some things you can change and some things that you just can't, but things that affect your bone density. So things that you can't change. First, 80% of people who have osteoporosis are women. Women have a much higher risk for osteoporosis than men due to lower estrogen levels as they age, which is bone protective. About 65% of our bone health can be attributed to heredity. So if your mom or dad had osteoporosis, or a first generation relative, such as a sibling, you are at a much higher risk yourself. Obviously, age. There's a certain amount of just natural bone loss that occurs, especially postmenopausal for women. So the older you are, the higher your risk. If you have a history of fracture, and then there's also certain medical conditions and medications, and that I'll show you a list of the most common in a minute that affect bone density. We can't do too much about these risk factors, but it's important that you're aware of them so you can take extra steps to help minimize their effect. Things you can change. Obviously, calcium and vitamin D are vitally important for bone health. Stop smoking if you are a smoker. Limit your alcohol consumption. Physical activity, especially weight-bearing activity and high-impact exercise. And remembering to improve your posture. Improved posture does more than just make you look better. It opens up the lungs, helps oxygenate the body, helps improve blood flow, which is essential, obviously, to deliver those nutrients to the places they need to go. Some medications, and the lower your body weight, the lower your BMI, has a negative impact on your bone health as well. So medical conditions and medications we consider secondary osteoporosis, meaning it was not something that you can change. It's not due to your age or gender or heredity. And there are certain medical conditions that will predispose you to low bone density. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are the most common ones that we certainly see at OsteoStrong, and the most common ones that will be red flags for your medical doctors as well. If you're diagnosed with a chronic illness, you need to talk to your doctor about what other illnesses may be associated with it. If bone density is a concern, you need to increase your prevention strategies. And again, cancer and all cancer treatments can cause bone loss. So be sure to talk to your doctor and make sure that that's part of your treatment regimen. Certain medications also, it cause an increased probability of low bone density and possibly osteoporosis. Again, this list is not exhaustive, but it is some of the most commons that we see. Being on steroid drugs like prednisone is one of the most common causes of secondary osteoporosis. And people who have asthma, allergies, anybody who has an autoimmune condition are almost always prescribed steroids to help tamp down on the symptoms. Medications for reflux or GERD are also common causes for bone loss. So that's what this PPIs is. That stands for proton pump inhibitors, commonly known as Nexium, Prilosec, and then there's a couple of over-the-counter Zantac and things like that as well. But that is something that a lot of people who are taking these medications are not aware of. And it isn't until they're prescribed or diagnosed with osteoporosis that the link is made. So if you're taking any of these medications or just wondering about anything you might be taking, look at the little insert, jump onto Google, or have a conversation with your doctor. And it looks like we have a raised hand. Is there anything in the... All right, Georgia, you're raising your hand. I unmuted you if you want to unmute yourself if you have a question. No? All right. So, what is osteoporosis? Osteoporosis is a disease characterized by loss of bone mass, which leads to fragile bones that can easily break. As we already discussed, bone is living tissue. It goes through a continual process of remodeling where old bone is removed and replaced by new bone. Healthy bone on the left, excuse me, is strong. It holds up, it protects our internal organs, supports many of our biological processes, and when muscles contract and relax, bones help us move around. We just covered a lot of things that can affect bone tissue, causing it to lose density and possibly become osteoporotic. And that's what an osteoporotic bone looks like on the inside. You can see that the bone on the right is thinner, and you can just imagine that it will not be able to hold up to all that we might expect it to do. We frequently hear about people sneezing and possibly breaking a bone. And if you compare the two pictures, you can see very dramatically why that might happen. So is osteoporosis a problem? Is it even something, I mean, unless you've been diagnosed with it, is it something we even need to really be concerned about? It's actually an epidemic in this country.
I don't know. I've just been told by my general provider on the advice of my rheumatologist that I'm going to start taking a once a week medication to help my bone density.
All right, I'm not sure what happened there, but we'll get to Georgia's questions here in just a minute. 70% of people who actually have osteoporosis have not been screened and don't know they have it. In fact, many people are often diagnosed with osteoporosis after suffering from a fracture.
Dr. Bauer, I just unmuted.
I'm not sure.
Can you hear me?
Oh, there you are. Okay, yes, Georgia.
All right, I did hear from my rheumatologist today and my GP that I'm going to start a medication, a once a week medication to help increase my bone density. So I'm really new to this, you know.
Yes.
So this is really illuminating for me. It is. I never really worried about it. I took calcium and vitamin D, and now my DEXA scan a few weeks ago showed that I do have something going on there. It showed penia, or what do you call it? Osteopenia.
Yes.
But then my rheumatologist goes, no, it's more than that. Call your GP. So now I'm on a medication. So
Georgia, your story is one we hear so often. And you're right. Nobody thinks about their bones until there's a problem. You know, it's just, we're a little bone crazy around here. And so, of course, bone health is always on our radar.
Sure.
But you are so right. And we hear that so often, which is why it's why we do what we do. And that's,
I like to think, Dr. Bauer, I like to think I'm not that old. I'm coming up on 70, but I guess that's
not old. There. You're only as old as you act. So,
that's right.
All right, honey. And then if you have questions, we'll be doing a live question and answer at the end. So thank you very much for sharing.
How to do this. Thank you.
So 70% of people over the age of 65 have osteoporosis, but have never been screened and don't know they have it. Almost the vast majority of people who end up being diagnosed, it's because just during a general screening because they turned 65 or because they've ended up having a fracture or broken a bone. Osteoporosis is a life-altering and major public health problem in this country. Treatment of it costs billions of dollars, suffering from fractures and lost quality of life. Every 20 seconds, somebody in this country will have a preventable fracture. So during our time together, which hopefully won't be much more than an hour, 180 Americans will have had a preventable fracture. Imagine that. It's a significant number. Osteoporosis and fracture account for more, or affects more women than breast cancer, stroke, and heart attack combined. Bone health and osteoprevention must be a priority. It affects men and women from all racial groups and can rob people of their independence and quality of life. But the good news is that osteoporosis is very preventable and it's now treatable. Today is a great day to take actions that will improve your bone health for a lifetime. So let's talk about how we assess your risk for bone loss and osteoporosis. There is a huge difference between screening and diagnosing. Screening tools lead to a diagnosis, but the gold standard as of right now is what we call a DEXA scan or a bone mineral test. That's with X-ray technology. But some of the screening tools that we use, some of it is just history. A recent wrist fracture may seem insignificant at the time, but it can be an important signal that your bones may not be as strong as they could be, especially if that wrist fracture or any fracture was without a major injury. Height loss can be another sign of low bone density. More than an inch can signal microfractures in your spine, which are often not painful or easy to ignore. It's just kind of soreness. Make sure that you get your height measured at every doctor's visit, and anything over about 1 inch is cause for concern. There are opportunities to get wrist and heel screens at health fairs, and that's actually what we do at OsteoStrong for any new member who's not had a recent DEXA scan. It's actually about 50% of our new members have never had a DEXA scan, or it's been a really long time. So we use the wrist screening to screen for the need for a repeat DEXA or their first one. American Bone Health also has a tool called the Fracture Risk Calculator that's available online and takes into account those risk factors that we discussed earlier and tells you whether you're at low, moderate, or high risk of having an actual fracture. If any of these screening tools show that you're at risk for osteoporosis, you need to get diagnosed. And the only way to get diagnosed right now with osteoporosis is with that DEXA scan over here. The test measures the amount of bone density, usually just in the spine and hip, although they are doing the wrist now occasionally. But most women over the age of 65 and men over the age of 70 should be getting those DEXA scans done. And anybody younger with a risk factor, especially if there's anything in your family history, needs to be screened at a younger age. So now let's talk about T-scores. And if you've had a DEXA scan, you know that what a T-score is, or you're probably at least familiar with what we call a T-score. And when you get a bone density test, the results are recorded as a T-score, which basically tells us how far away your bone density is from the normal. And we base that normal on the bone density expected for an average person at the age of 30, because that's when we reach peak bone mass. So your T-score is going to be somewhere along a continuum, typically -4 to +4. So if you are anywhere from -1 T-score upwards, you're in the green. Green means good. Green is normal as compared to an average 30-year-old. Low bone density, or the diagnosis of osteopenia, is a T-score of -1 to -2.5. And at the point of -2.5 or lower is red, and that is a diagnosis of osteoporosis. So what do these T-scores mean? So we know that they're compared to an average 30-year-old, which is when we reach peak bone mass, but these numbers can be roughly correlated to a percentage. So if you have a -1 T-score anywhere in your body, that is roughly correlated with about a 10% bone loss. And then same if you're up here and you have a +1, that roughly correlates with 10% more bone density than the average 30-year-old. So at the point of being diagnosed with osteoporosis at -2.5, we can roughly correlate that -2.5 T-score to about a 25% bone loss compared to peak bone mass at the age of 30. And so -3 would be a 30% bone loss, -4 would be 40%. So it becomes really significant when you really understand what those T-scores are telling you. And any questions, Sarah? All right. So now let's talk about some fun stuff. We know kind of what it is, what potentially could be causing it, the bone remodeling, bone growth. So let's talk about how we slow it down. The dynamic duo, calcium and vitamin D, and weight-bearing activity. So calcium and vitamin D every day. Calcium, excuse me, and vitamin D in combination with each other really become the dynamic duo for bone health. Calcium is a mineral that makes your bones strong, but calcium needs vitamin D to absorb it into the body. So the two go hand in hand. The amounts you need of each vary with age. Generally, you want to be getting between 1,000 and 1,200 milligrams of calcium every day. If you can get it through your diet, all the better. Our body absorbs nutrients through the food we eat much more efficiently than any other way. This is pretty easy to obtain this 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams a day if you eat dairy and green leafy veggies. But if you don't eat dairy or have an allergy to dairy, or you don't eat a whole lot of green leafy veggies, you may need a calcium supplement. Your body can only absorb about 500 milligrams at a time though. So you need to be splitting that supplementation up during different times of the day. You can also get too much calcium. So dietary is best because it absorbs better and the body knows what to do with it. Excuse me. And if you have any health conditions at all, especially heart conditions, you need to visit with your primary doctor about a calcium supplement if you're thinking you need to be on one. We know vitamin D is often called the sunshine vitamin, but concerns about skin cancer and the latitude of the sun, meaning we're in the northern hemisphere, it makes it not a reliable source of vitamin D. Vitamin D3 supplements are inexpensive, and everyone with concerns about their bone health should be taking them. The most recent recommendations from the Institutes of Medicine for vitamin D is 2,000 IUs per day because we live in the northern hemisphere. Check with your doctor about having your vitamin D3 levels checked prior to starting a supplement to make sure that your proper dosage. And vitamin D is a fascinating little vitamin. It's actually a hormone, but vitamin D, it's also important for immune health. And recent research is now showing vitamin D can reduce falls for up to 20% for those over the age of 65, primarily because of its effect on the nervous system. So exercise for bone health. Weight-bearing exercises help slow bone loss. Excuse me. Weight-bearing helps stimulate bone-building cells, those osteoblasts, through the impact of weight being transmitted through the bone. All of the activities listed here are great and have many, many, many health benefits and can also help with balance. But be aware that these activities will not build bone density. These activities will slow bone loss, but they will not build bone density. Exercises to prevent falls and fractures. So, time to move. We're all about moving our body here at OsteoStrong. So enough sitting. Let's get up for a minute and move our body. And stand up with me. And were you able to get out of your chair without using your arms? It's a great indicator of your leg strength, and strong legs help prevent falls and fractures. All right, and I am going to, Sarah just told me that you can't see me, and so I don't know how to turn my video on, Sarah. I'm sorry, don't know how to turn our video on. So, but now that you're standing, let's talk about posture. We learned all about the importance of posture as kids, and we need to be reminded of it as we get older as well. Strengthening the muscles between your shoulders can help protect your spine and improve your balance. So, as we're all standing up, we're going to stand up nice and straight as we can. We're going to put our arms straight out to the side. Raise them up so that we'll form a Y. This is called the Y exercise. So we're going to form a Y with our body, like YMCA. We're going to pinch our shoulder blades back, and we're going to tighten up our butt muscles. So we're going to clench our glutes. And then we're going to bring our arms down into a T position and keep those shoulder blades tight, and bring back up into a Y. Back down into a T, keep those shoulder blades tight, keep your butt tight, and back up into a Y. Couple of big deep breaths. Feels good, doesn't it? So, one thing you can also work on during your day, you guys can go ahead and sit down if you want to, stay standing if you want. If that Y exercise feels really good, which it should, you can keep doing it. But one thing that you can work on during your day is that you can also do what we call modified squats over your chair. So when we stood up, only stand up about halfway. You can use the arms if you need to, but use your legs as much as possible. Hover for a second or two and sit back down. If you do this regularly, or just make a habit of it, each time you try to get up out of a chair, just taking 5 or 10 seconds, you're going to see how quickly your thigh muscles start to respond, and you'll also notice yourself getting much stronger pretty darn quick. Single leg balancing is also really important. Try holding onto the back of a chair or the counter and just standing on one leg. If you work on this throughout the day, you're going to start to notice a difference in a very short amount of time and be able to balance without holding on. Easy ways to incorporate that is to stand on one leg when you're brushing your teeth. You can hang on to the bathroom counter if you want to. Dressing in the morning by actually standing on one leg, holding on to the counter or the dresser next to you. But just, again, incorporating that into a daily kind of habit will work wonders. So Any comments or questions? All right. So let's get into the really fun stuff, building bone density. Yes, we want to slow it, but what we really want to do is start building back that bone density. So there's a few options. If you're diagnosed with osteoporosis or you have a fracture, there are medication options available, and we'll talk about those shortly. And while walking and yoga, Pilates, and balance exercises are great forms of exercise and have a lot of benefits, they simply will not provide enough stimulus to the bone tissue to increase bone density. So we'll talk about what will. The same is with proper nutrition. While calcium and vitamin D, along with protein and omega-3 fatty acids and all the other nutrients that we get from our diet, along with lifestyle changes, these are all essential for bone health, but without the proper stimulus, without the actual workload, the body cannot build bone from raw materials alone. So medication options. There are medication options available, from pills to injections. However, we're not your physicians and we cannot give out medical advice. So our recommendation is to talk to your doctor and just be informed on how these medications work. Many of them are self-limiting, meaning you can only be on them for a certain period of time because they can start to create more brittleness and actually increase your fracture risk. So a lot of times people will be put on a medication like Fosamax or Reclast, and after about 3 to 5 years, sometimes upwards of 7, they'll take a drug holiday is what most medical doctors will call it, or they will be switched to a different form of medication. So just be aware of that. There's a lot of debate right now in the bone health world, especially as people become more aware and there's more focus being put on bone health. There's a lot of debate right now between bone density and bone quality when it actually comes to fracture prevention, because that's literally what we're trying to do, is just prevent that fracture and prevent the weakening of our skeletal system from impacting our quality of life. So lifestyle and nutrition for bone health. We have some yeses on the left and some no's, so some do's and don'ts. You need to be getting at least 6 hours of good sleep a night. Naps are good too, so work them in. If you're not a good night sleeper, work in some naps. We need to be reducing our stress. Perfect way to start reducing our stress is to practice gratitude. Calcium, vitamin D3, protein, and omega-3 fatty acids are vital components of nutrition for bone health. No's, we need to limit alcohol consumption, no more than 2 servings a day. And so a serving size is a glass of wine, a 12-ounce can of beer, or a 1-ounce serving of hard alcohol. No smoking, no sodas, no carbonation. It leaches calcium out of the bones to help buffer the blood. And limit coffee. Limit coffee to 2 or 3 cups a day. Caffeine is also acidic, and so the body will leach calcium and other minerals out of the bone tissue to help buffer that. Water, water, water. For those of you who are members at OsteoStrong, you know that we take our water serious. Everyone's given a water bottle and encouraged to fill up each week when you come in for your sessions. But water is so important for every aspect of health of the body, and bone health is no different. Reduce your sugar intake. Sugar is highly inflammatory, and it's also highly acidic. And watch your sodium as well. Sodium also has to be buffered in the blood by calcium primarily, and it's not good for your kidneys either. So do's and don'ts. So if weight-bearing activities are not enough to actually build bone density, what does increase bone density? So we've known since the 19th century, based on Wolff's Law, that our bones adapt to the stress or demands that are placed on them. Meaning when you put pressure or a compressive force on your bones, your bone tissue responds by remodeling and becoming stronger. So you can see here, we're compressing that bone. There's an adaptive response that happens. And the bone basically starts to lay down new osteoblastic activity in order to make that bone stronger to handle the load that's being asked of it. Osteogenesis, which is healthy new bone formation, is stimulated, and osteoblasts start laying down new bone tissue. Just like many processes in our body, our bone responds to the environment in which it's placed. Other examples of this would be when our pupils dilate or you're shivering and sweating in response to temperature. But even though we've known about Wolff's Law for over a century, it wasn't until 2012 that a group of researchers discovered just how much force it takes to stimulate this osteogenesis. And what they discovered was truly surprising. They found that it takes 4.2 multiples of your own body weight of force to stimulate osteogenesis in the hip joint. So if you weigh 150 pounds, that is a minimum of 630 pounds of pressure. So how do we do this? That's a lot. How do we do this and not hurt ourselves? So we know that normal exercise does not provide enough force. And here is kind of normal exercise in multiples of body weight. This is from American Bone Health. Swimming and bicycling is weightless, so there is no load whatsoever on your bone tissue. Brisk walking is about 1 to 2 multiples of your body weight. If you're running or jogging, it's about 2.5 to 3 multiples of your body weight. Jumping and strength training, powerlifting, create about 4 multiples of your body weight. So gymnastics and powerlifting are kind of 2 of the conventional exercises that do a great job at building incredibly strong bones. So gymnasts and powerlifters typically have incredibly strong foundations, very, very, very dense bone tissue, but they have a very high risk of injury. So at OsteoStrong, we do a process called osteogenic loading. And when we are able to combine the high impact forces with positive lifestyle changes, amazing things happen. We utilize a technology, we call it osteogenic loading at OsteoStrong, that allows our members to reach the types of forces to stimulate osteogenesis regularly while minimizing the risk of injury. So 4.2 multiples becomes doable. When you focus on strengthening the foundation of the body, your bones, everything else strengthens too. Posture and balance improves, you become more flexible and agile, reduce back and joint pain, you're less prone to injury, you have more energy, and we've even had some members gain some height back. That's been pretty cool. And if you have type 2 diabetes, your A1C can also improve. That's what we do at OsteoStrong all day, every day. It is our passion, it is what we do. So final check-in, Sarah, how's the chat? All right, so we're gonna start wrapping things up and then we'll do Q&A at the end here. So, oh yes.
How do I learn about this osteogenic loading? I need that. How do I learn about
Georgia, we're gonna talk about that here in just a couple of minutes.
All right, great, thank you.
You bet. So I've thrown a lot at you guys, but just some important things to remember. We reach peak bone mass at 30 years old, and from that point in our life, it's up to us to maintain or slow as much bone loss as possible. Remember the 7 key functions of bone. It's so much more than structure and support. And when those osteoblasts and osteoclasts are active, they play a primary role in hormone metabolism and immunity, along with detoxification. There is a drastic difference between slowing bone loss and actually building bone density. We need both the building blocks, the proper nutrition, along with the proper stimulus in order to actually build that bone density. So I kind of liken that to the materials, the raw materials, your building materials, and the landscapers have to show up if that landscaping project is going to get done. Same thing, you need the nutrition along with the stimulation to strengthen the foundation of the body. And it's important to know your risk factors so you know what you can control and what you can't. And so what's next? I wanted to give you guys some actionable things. So each of you probably noticed different things that caught your attention throughout this presentation. Hopefully you've learned something. I would like you to actually leave today though with at least one thing you can do as a result of this talk. It could be getting an assessment of your bone health risk and assessing your fracture risk. This is a great place to start if you've never had a DEXA scan. How about slowing bone loss? By making sure you're getting enough calcium and vitamin D and doing weight-bearing exercise. If you're not doing any form of exercise right now, starting anywhere is better than nothing. Remember, we talked about balance and posture. This can help prevent falls and fractures. And finally, if you have low bone density or osteoporosis, learn what you need to know about the options that are available to you. But most importantly, I hope you now understand the consequences of not taking action. Please don't be a victim to osteoporosis. It is truly life-changing when you suffer a fracture, especially a hip fracture. Support your bones for a lifetime of health, live your best life, and stay physically active. So we've covered a lot. If you don't remember it all, the recording and notes will be on their way as soon as we're done. Talk to your coach at your next session if you're an OsteoStrong member. Call us, shoot us a text, check out our website, osteostrong.me, or email us, osteostronglouise@osteostrong.me. And Georgia, if you're interested in learning more, there is actually an OsteoStrong. That's what we do here in Sioux Falls. There's an OsteoStrong here in Sioux Falls. There's one in Sioux City. OsteoStrong is actually a franchise that's worldwide, and that's all we do every day, all day, is improve people's bone density for a variety of different goals.
Thank you, Dr. Bear. This was very illuminating. Thank you.
Awesome. I am so glad that you found value in it and chose to spend your time with us today. I don't take that lightly, so thank you.
You're welcome.
If you want to visit with us about your health goals or health challenges, you have two options. You can schedule a free private one-on-one in-center session, talk to us about your challenges, and also try out what a session would be like. Or if you'd rather not, if you are social distancing or have health conditions that keep you at home, you can book a complimentary virtual phone consult as well, and we do the exact same thing.
Very good.
And we do have a special membership offer for our participants today that are not currently members. If you are interested in learning more and registered to attend this, getting started at OsteoStrong after this StrongTalk, you can save $180. So give us a call and ask us how, and we'll get you set up.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely. And any more questions?
Yes, I have one quick question.
Yes, ma'am. How's Paula?
Yeah, if I wanted to, well, I was thinking of telling some other people about it.
Yeah.
Do you have what the new membership special costs to tell them?
Yes. So what the new membership special is, honey, so they would get started for a full month, enrollment fee and service fee for $148.
$148?
Yep.
And that's the service fee and the enrollment for the first month?
Yep. And then that's first month membership. So that's everything.
Right. Okay.
And then they can try out the whole membership for that first month and then decide going forward from there.
Okay.
So they would get the PEMF, massage chair, all that stuff. So.
All right.
Yeah.
I will pass it on.
I do
Thank you.
have a question. I have a question. What is the membership fee monthly then?
So OsteoStrong is a monthly membership, and it starts at $99 a month. And then we do have some extras here. It really depends on what your goals are, Georgia. We have some extras here to help improve bone density along with loading. And so it's $99 up to $139, depending on what you want to,
All right.
what your goals
Thank
are.
you.
Yes.
Thank you.
And
I
anything
have
else?
one question. I have one question.
Yes.
My PA actually mentioned, besides the calcium and the vitamin D, that vitamin K2 also helps with absorption of calcium.
Yes. So if that is an interest going forward here, we like to do these Strong Talks monthly. And I've done nutrition strong Talks in the past, because there is so much more to bone health than just calcium and vitamin D, but that's the foundation. That's where we have to start. Vitamin K2, however, so if we think about calcium and we either eat it or take it in supplement, we need vitamin D to actually get that calcium out of the digestive tract once it's been digested. Vitamin D is essential to actually get the body to absorb calcium, but then we have the challenge of getting that calcium out of the bloodstream. And that's where vitamin K2 comes in. Vitamin K2 is kind of like your railroad cars. So once vitamin D transports the calcium into the bloodstream, vitamin K2 arrives to take that calcium out of the bloodstream so that we don't end up with calcification, and transports it into the bone tissue. So she is very right. vitamin K2 is essential for bone health as well.
Well, thank you.
Yes. All right, and so Sarah is guiding me here. She says we need to get you back on video. There we go. Hello. So any other questions? And if you guys would like to see a strong talk on nutrition or have any other kind of topics that you would like to see discussed, please let us know when you're in the center. Shoot us a text, an email. If you'd like more just nutrition advice one-on-one, let me know. That's actually something that I used to do all the time in the clinic, was some nutrition stuff for patients. So that's not a big deal. All right, well, if there's nothing else, we're gonna sign off for now. Try to get this uploaded and out to you guys as quickly as possible with the recording along with the notes.
All right, thank you, Dr. Bear.
Thank you very much.